Hello everybody and welcome to this video on managing CasaTunes music services using the CasaTunes app. In this video, we're going to see how to delete music service accounts, how to add music service accounts, including how to rename the account that's displayed in CasaTunes. We're going to see how you can add multiple Spotify browser accounts, how to reauthorize account when it shows that account needs to be reauthorized, and how to delete the default CD music collection that is included when you first start CasaTunes. So with that, let's get started. So I've started the CasaTunesX app in a browser, and you can see that we start out in our rooms view. So let's go into the master bedroom, and if we go into the master bedroom and we go to pick music, you'll see that by default CasaTunes includes your disk music and internet music, and the CD music is basically music that CasaTunes found on your music server, and it basically consists of three different songs, and these songs are useful for testing purposes, but chances are is that you don't need these songs, so you want to be able to remove this CD music collection, and so we'll talk about that later on. The other default music service that's installed is Shoutcast, and let's suppose that we're not interested in Shoutcast, but we are interested in adding Arable Radio or TuneIn. So first of all, let's look at how we delete a music service account. So to delete a music service account, the first thing that we need to do is we need to get into the music services editing mode. And this is this button up here in the top right hand corner, add or edit. This is to add or edit music services, and it's basically like a toggle. So when I press or click on this button, it puts me into the music services editing mode, and when I press done, it takes me out of the music services editing mode. So let's go into the editing music services mode, and now you will see that next to the Shoutcast option here, we have a More button, and if I press or click on the More button, you'll see that there's an option to delete this music service. So let's go ahead and delete this Shoutcast music service. So we get a confirmation prompt, and we'll say OK, and now that Shoutcast music service is now being removed from our CasaTunes installation. Okay, so now let's look at how we add a music service account. So once again, we go up to the top right hand corner here in our UI, and we select the Add or Edit button to enter into the music services editing mode. And now we select the Add Music Service button down here on the bottom right hand corner, and it lists all the different music services that CasaTunes supports. And if you have universal plug-and-play devices, you can also add those here. So the first thing that I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to add the Arable podcast music service and the Arable radio service. Now, some people will prefer TuneIn versus Arable Radio. Arable Radio has one or two advantages. For example, Arable Radio supports HLS streams, and this, for example, is important if you want to listen to BBC Radio. It's one of the new formats that they support, whereas under TuneIn, that support is currently not available. So one thing that you might discover is that you might find that some of your radio stations are available in Arable Radio and not available in TuneIn, and others may be available in TuneIn but not available in Arable Radio. So you really need to investigate which of these you want to use, but in my case, I'm going to go ahead and use Arable Radio. So to install Arable Radio, all I have to do is press or click on the Arable Radio music service, and it will add it. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the name Arable Radio, So what I can do now is rename it. And again, you'll see here, I've got the More button next to the Arable Radio. So when I press on that or click on that, there's a rename option. So I'm just going to call this my radio. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add my podcast. So I'm going to open up my podcasts, and then I'm going to select Arable Podcast. And again, I'm going to rename this to be something a little bit shorter. So I'm just going to call this Podcasts. Okay. So that's how we add a music service. And when we're done adding the music services, we can just go ahead and press on the Done button. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add multiple Spotify browser music service accounts. So let's see how we do this. So once again, I'm going to come up here to the Add or Edit button and select it so that we're now in our editing music services mode. I'm going to add a music service, and in this case it's going to be the Spotify browser. So I'm going to add a Spotify browser account. Now I have two sources here. I've got Jack's player, you can see it up here, and Jill's player. And each Jack and Jill have their own Spotify accounts. So I'm going to basically add Jack's first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rename this so that I know which account this is. And I'm going to say that this is Jack's Spotify. Okay. Now we haven't set up, even though we've added the Spotify browser account, we haven't set up any information about you know, whose account it is and what their passwords are and all that kind of stuff. So in the case of Spotify, what happens is if we navigate into Jack's Spotify by pressing or clicking on Jack's Spotify, you'll see that you're now prompted to log in to authorize your Spotify browser account. So let's go ahead and do the login. And what you'll see over here is that we are now sent over to the Spotify authentication form. And basically, we have to tell Spotify that we agree to allow CasaTunes to be able to do all these things, which is what's required to play Spotify within CasaTunes. And the other very important thing to look at when you're adding a Spotify account is to check to see which account is currently logged in. So I'm currently logged in as Crinker Guest, and that's not the account that I want to set up for Jack. So I'm going to say that that's not me. And then it will ask me to enter in my credentials for my Spotify account that I want to use for Jack. So I'm going to actually use an account called CasaTunes for Jack. And I'll go ahead and enter in the password, and we'll go ahead and log in. Okay, and now that we're logged in, if we go back to the bottom of the screen here, we'll see that we're logged in as CasaTunes, which is exactly what I want. So let's agree to that. And we have successfully authenticated CasaTunes to access Spotify. So we'll go ahead and close this tab. And now when we navigate into Jack's Spotify, you'll see that we see all our Spotify music that's available for playing. Okay, so now let's repeat for Jill. So let's go ahead and add a music service, and we're just going to go down and add another Spotify browser account. And we're going to rename this one, and we're going to call it Jill Spotify. And once again, when we navigate into Jill's Spotify account, it's going to prompt us for the login credentials. So we're going to go into the authorization process again with Spotify. And again, this time though, it's saying that I'm logged in as CasaTunes because that was the last account that we used. But that's not the one I want to use. In the case of, in this case, I want to use my Crinker Guest account for Jill. And let's just enter in the Spotify password. Okay, And now when we drill down, we'll see that we're logged in as Crinker Guest, and that is the account that I want to use for Jill, so I agree to do that. Okay, I can close this tab now, and now both Jack and Jill's Spotify is correctly set up. Okay, now the one thing I want to show you is if we're on Jack's player, so let's go ahead and select some music from Jack's Spotify here. So let's go ahead and say that we're going to say this is Taylor Swift. That sounds good. And let's go ahead and play those songs now. Okay, so now we're playing on Jack's. We're playing music on Jack's player, and one thing to notice is that in the UI itself, in the now playing screen, you'll see that we have the Spotify logo here, which indicates that this is we're playing music from Spotify. And then over here, you will notice that we have the name of the Spotify account that's currently in use. So we selected music from Jack's Spotify, and so that's why it says that this is Jack's Spotify account. If I now switch sources and I go to Jill's player and I select music, and I select music from Jill's Spotify, and let's say we pick Hot Country. Let's go ahead and play that and then return back to our now playing screen. So you see here that the Spotify account that's in use is Jill's Spotify, and if we switch back to Jack's player, you'll see the account is Jack's Spotify. So so that's showing you that we are playing different music on different Spotify accounts. Now, one other thing that I want to show you is that sometimes you may get into a situation where we have, let me go back over here, we have this red alert over here telling us that there are issues. And when I select this, it'll give me a synopsis of what the issues are. So there are instances where you will have the issues icon. When you select the issues icon, you'll get something like this, like the account Jill Spotify is not authorized to stream music from Spotify. Please reauthorize it. These accounts can get reset, and then you have to reauthorize them. So when you get this message, don't panic. All you have to do is go back into your Spotify music and go to Jill's Spotify, because it was complaining about Jill's Spotify. Select the More button, and then just select Reauthorize Account, and it'll walk you through that same process that we did to authenticate with Spotify. So now there's one last item that we wanted to discuss, and that is how do I remove the default CD music collection. So if we go back to our screen over here, you can see we have this Disc Music CD music collection. And you know, this is primarily used by us for testing, so that we always have music on the server that we can test with. But it's something that you probably want to get rid of. And the way to get rid of this is actually what we call a My Music collection. So in order to manage your music collections, you have to actually go to the CasaTunes settings. So we'll go back to Settings, and we'll go to My Music. And all you have to do here is basically delete this music collection. If you want to find out more information about what is my CD music collection, you can look at the properties, and you can see here that the name of this collection is called CD Music, and that it looks for the music in this location here, which is actually a path that's local on that music server. There will be other tutorials on how to set up My Music, but in this case, all we really want to be able to do is just delete this CD music collection. So let's go ahead and delete it. We get our confirmation prompt, we select that, and now it's deleted. So now when I go back to My Music, you'll see that there's no longer the disc music. Okay, and with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you.